The Struggling Artist Record Club is a vinyl record subscription service where I hunt and curate the best punk and punk-adjacent music out there and mail their record to your door each and every month. Imagine finding your new favorite band from across the country without ever having to leave the house. It doesn't get much better than that. The excitement of discovering new music just got that much easier. As a member of the Struggling Artist Record Club, you are going to receive some of the best music you've ever heard from bands you may never even heard of. Whether you've been collecting records for years or just starting out, the Struggling Artist Record Club is designed specifically for you. And right now, all new members get a Struggling Artist Record Club exclusive along with the monthly selection. So head to StrugglingArtistRecordClub.com, pick a membership, and start building that collection today. First and foremost, Benny, I want to apologize. I feel like every time I email you, I forget to put something in the email. And like the last email was the one where I was like, I went to write, "Are you ready for Wednesday?" And I swear I wrote it. And I didn't. And I was so conscious about I was like, I can't make a mistake in this one. This guy must think I'm the biggest nincompoop.
Actually, you're in great company because my poor band, when I write, it is what you wrote is how I write to them every time. So they literally have to decipher half the time what I'm saying. I don't like S's. I always use Z's.
Yeah. Okay.
So, and my songwriter is a grammar. He's just really into grammar, so it really bothers him that I do it. And I purposely do it now because I know it bothers him. So
right.
You are fine. You are fine.
I want to say too, I was thinking today, I was like, I don't know how to start this podcast because I have multiple kind of things I wanted to kick it off with, but I'm going to do it with this one. You sent me the wildest sentence I had ever read from anybody when you reached out to me. And I just you're like, if you ever want to talk to a singer, funeral director, I don't know what a death doula is. I don't even know if I said that right, and then death consultant, I'm game. And then you wrote Benny, the boy detective. And I was like, wow. Unpack.
Oh, absolutely. So I don't know if you want me to get into it, but yeah, death doula is what the term that I wrote you. I'm certified death doula. So think of a baby doula, like a birthing doula, but I'm for death. I literally am certified.
I don't even know what a doula is. You're going to have to explain it to me.
Oh, so a birthing doula, are literally trained people to help mothers give birth.
Oh, okay. I got you.
That's a very small way of saying it. So basically these people help mothers and fathers really go through the birthing process. They start with the family before, they help them kind of get ready. They help them pack bags. They're specialized to help with the mother specifically have a plan and then maintain the plan during the whole birth. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay. They're a lot more midwives. That's what they do. They're trained midwives specifically. So I think of the opposite of that. So I help families. I'm certified to help families go through the process of dying. And then I'm a funeral director just in general. I'm literally a mortician / funeral director, so I can help them get ready for the process and then also deal with the process after.
Right.
And on top of that, I decided to go back to school to get my master's in social work so I could also do aftercare therapy for my family.
Wow. Okay. Can we talk about that for a minute?
Yeah,
we're going to talk about everything. I promise you. We're going to get to the band.
I'm not worried about it.
We're going to get to your podcast. We're going to get to your podcast too because I didn't know you had one. So that's going to be on the docket too. I always tell people this is riding in Boston. We have the train, the T, and I'm like it's like riding the T. There's a goal. You have a destination, but there's going to make stops along the way. You know what I mean? So, that's got to be a tough gig. All of everything you just said, and like empathetic, right? Very, very. You must have a lot of empathy. Like, how do you? I mean, is it hard? You know what I mean? Like, if you do a job, if you do something for a long time, I don't know if it gets easier or not as far as like the emotional part of it. You know what I mean? How does that all work?
So basically, to get this all started, I am a fourth generation funeral director. So Dad was a funeral director, Grandpa was a funeral director, great grandpa was a funeral director. We've always lived next to the funeral home, like literally, like the parking lot is the funeral home, parking lot, our house. Always has been that way. In fact, now I own the house and have my children growing up in it. Mm-hmm. That being said, I have a different relationship with not only a funeral home in general, but also with death and grief, because I literally have been born and surrounded by it. They consider funeral directors to be basically dealing with what they call secondhand trauma daily. So it's a calling. So when I was growing up, I didn't want to do this. I'm one of four sons for my father, and I'm actually the baby. I'm the youngest, but the youngest technically because there's twins. So yes, I'm younger by 4 minutes, but yes. Okay. So my older brother went into school. He went into education. My second older brother went into sales, and then so it was down to us two. And even though my father never forced it on us, there is that like there's 4 generations. Like if we don't do it, nobody's gonna do it. So. When I was going through high school, I decided I don't want to do the 24/7, man. That's a hard gig. 365, 24/7. I'm a small town, so like literally, death call comes, we take the death call. We have to get suited up, go to the family's house or the hospital, do what we call the removal. But you also have to be empathetic, right? You can't just like, oh, where's your dad in the back? Okay, I'll go get dad, and I'll see you later, right?
You're not picking up a junk car or anything like that, right?
It's cold outside. Can you just get dad outside, and we can do it from there, you know? No. So, and then we come back here, and if we're doing embalming, we do the embalming process, and then I meet the family in the morning, do the arrangement, visitation, funeral. So, like, dad and I are like a duo team. We do everything. We tag team everything, basically. The sad part about that is the only time I'm really not on call is when I'm playing in the band, which we will get to, or I'm on vacation. The sad part is because of my occupation and my dad's, I will never probably be on a vacation with my father ever again.
Right.
Because he's got to hold down the fort while I'm gone and vice versa. Honestly, the job is extremely hard. I'm not going to say it's not. I always tell, because I go in and talk to high schoolers about death and grief, but I also talk to young funeral directors going into it. And the biggest thing I tell them is, my dad told me this when I first started. And, you know, when you're a kid, you're like, whatever, Dad, you don't know what you're talking about. But he said, basically, if you're going to be a funeral director, you're going to be married to this profession. Meaning, no matter what you have with your life, your kids, your wife, there's always going to be, death is going to come, and it's never on a 9 to 4, right? The Grim Reaper doesn't just take office hours. That's not how it works.
Right.
And then so there's a lot of times I remember Dad on Christmas being gone. You know, we'd be opening presents and he'd leave. Or my birthday, or football games or basketball games when I used to be in sports. And it really bothered me because I was like, really? Like, I want my dad here. But then, like, growing up, when you start actually becoming an adult, you realize that this family's going through hell, basically, and you're the one constant, specifically if you're in a small town, that they trust you. So, like, it's not even for a lot of our families that we serve a thought. It's like, okay, Dad died, we got to call Capaul, so we got to get Benny or Dave here. So the answer to your question, yes. But what really happened when I noticed my job really became over the top was COVID. So COVID hit.
Oh, man.
And basically none of us funeral directors were allowed to do what we literally have been doing our entire lives. And then we also were given restrictions. And on top of that, we didn't know anything at the time. We were still like, couldn't get PPEs, which is personal protective equipment. And we were going into COVID wards because we don't shut down like everybody else did. We were frontline workers. And the problem that I had with it was twofold. First of all, the community that I served is a very conservative community. So as much as I respect their loyalty, they were a lot of them were following what our commander-in-chief was saying, which was it doesn't exist, and that all you need to do is drink bleach and all this kind of jazz garbage that was going on. So they would come in and they would be really upset because when you're dealing with grief, anger is already part of it, right? So on top of that, you have a funeral director saying to you, I'm so sorry, but you can only have 10 people in for the funeral. And they have to be socially distanced. You can't hug each other. You can't bring in food. So, like, we had to be these, like, security guards as well as funeral directors. And so it was really upsetting to the point where some of my families that I really were close to would say things like, I thought you and your dad cared more about this community to allow 10 in at a time. Regardless if you didn't believe it was real or not, it was a law. Like, there was a time I could lose my license if I don't follow it. Now, is a police officer going to come in and say, you have 25 people in here, I'm going to take your license? No. But the idea is what people don't realize is I actually do care about the health of my community.
You have a responsibility. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And not only that, the personal thing, which is a humanizing of what funeral directors are, we actually have lives too. We don't just hide in a closet waiting for your loved one to die.
Right.
I am going home to my family, my kids. Like, I could give this virus that we didn't know anything about to my children. I had a 4 and a 6-year-old at the time, and they could die. And it's not, and it was because of me, obviously, because I was the one going into COVID wards.
Yeah.
So all this was going on. So going into the mental health behind this, because I think it's important. I always was a bigger drinker. I'm going to be honest with you. I think a lot of us in the death profession tend to be self-medicating one way or another. Some in healthy ways, some not in healthy ways. I was hitting the bottle very, very hard, to the point where I noticed that I had a problem. I am an alcoholic, and I am now sober 3.5 years, by the way, so that's the bright side of the story.
Yeah.
But because of the COVID and because we weren't prepared and because I was literally being told by my community, because I was like calling every day to my community health, like, hey, when can I get the vaccine? So I at least can be comfortable, because the other thing is I work with my family.
Right.
So if I get sick and I get dad sick, we're done. We can't open our doors. We can't help the families we serve. So they were like, well, we consider you like a sanitation worker. So you need to hold back. Okay. So when it's your turn, you can come. But like the problem was, yes, this is how they looked at us. And so the problem was my twin went into psychology, specializing in grief and loss. So he was allowed to get his shot, even though he was only meeting virtual clients, because he was a doctor. I wasn't, even though I was the one actually going out there and going into COVID wards.
Yeah.
So that really made me mad, because that kind of brought the idea that I think a lot of people don't humanize funeral directors. They look at us like we're kind of death pariahs to a lot of people, or like they don't really exist until we need them. Like, we want you there when we need you, but they'll leave the funeral home and say comments like, I hope I don't see you soon. Ha ha ha. Well, after a while, that kind of gets to you, like,
wow,
because
you're a person, you have feelings, and like, you don't want to be known for this only. You know what I mean? Like, I totally get that, man.
So because of that, because of my sobriety, because of kind of figuring everything out, my twin and I, like I said, he's a doctor of psychology specializing in grief and loss, and I'm a funeral director, death doula, all that death stuff. We decided to start a podcast to start humanizing the conversation, not only about grief and loss, but also humanizing death professionals. So that's where Let's Talk About Death with Benny and Dr. Nick comes from.
I'm going to check that out, because I feel like that's super important. You know what I mean? Like, and I love podcasts like that, that dives into that kind of thing.
Well, absolutely. And the best part about our podcast, in my opinion, is the problem with a lot of death professionals, and this is not, if any death professionals listening to this, I'm not calling you out, I'm just telling you how it is. It tends to be very bland, because the problem is it's such an immense topic. Most people don't think that they can add a little bit of humor. But my thing is, being in a funeral home, I notice that humor helps, because it also humanizes that sometimes things are goofy. Like, sometimes death is silly. Sometimes it's sad. Sometimes and that's the other thing too. We only us as Americans have stigmatized and taboo death, like morose. Like, you go to other cultures and they're celebrating, they're laughing, they're crying, they're dancing, all at the same time. We as the United States, it's either we're direct doing things now, right? We're not even having services anymore. because we're just direct cremation. We don't want to spend money. We don't want to spend the time. This idea that like we don't want our grandkids to grieve for us or people to grieve, but the honesty is they're going to grieve. So your expectation of how people deal with grief, actually, you might think you're helping them. You actually might be actually causing harm. And so this is the conversation, right? And the idea is I'm not saying everybody needs a funeral. I'm not saying everybody needs a visitation, but I think a conversation needs to happen with your family, because at the end of the day, the funeral is about the people that are still alive.
Right.
They're for the people that are mourning. And so we get in this also individualistic, like we used to be a community society, right? You hear all the time the communities would get together for funerals, like the town would shut down, everybody would be at the funeral, the house would be open that the family would have, and they would make meals and let people stay the night and give gifts. They would actually give gifts to people who would come to funerals back in the a couple generations ago. And now we don't do that. Now it's just this direct thing, and wait, I didn't even know Shirley died, you know. And so, anyways, this is the whole conversation we have, because like people are even afraid to say died, right? We say passed away.
Right.
Why aren't we saying died? What's the problem with saying that? Like, they're conversating about that. But we also talk about like a lot of topics like anticipatory grief or disenfranchised grief, but also like big topics that are going on, like doctor-assisted suicide, and like everything to kind of get the conversation rolling, because we really don't know anything about death or grief until we start talking about it.
Yeah. That's awesome. And like, man, that's so like from everything from your podcast to your line of work in most of your life, like that's super important, man. Like that's crazy. And you know, I know a lot of people that like, I don't know a lot of people in your industry. I know a couple, but like, yeah, I remember like they were big drinkers, right? They were big drinkers. Like I know a lot of people who work in like education, like special education. They're big drinkers. Social workers, big drinkers. You know what I mean? So I totally get like that aspect of it, and to be able to recognize that for you, it got to an issue, like to a problem, and separate that. And then now you do all these other things that like kind of that like it's I don't want to say, how do I put this? Like your like your empathy is like awesome for that, right? It takes over. It takes over like the kind of like the just stone face stuff that, you know, that's something I would do, like stone face. You know what I mean? Like just kind of shut everything down. Like so even at a young age, you must have been dealing with emotions like this all the time, right?
Oh, well, absolutely. And then I happen to be extremely lucky and be married to my high school sweetheart. And I also have two beautiful children with her, and I am so proud of my family. But 3 months into our relationship, when we both were juniors in high school, her dad died by suicide. So on top of that, I also went through that like experience of seeing how her family dealt with it, and she has two different siblings and how they dealt with it. And so when I got old enough to start doing things, it's because my other passion is being a part of the community too. So I'm in two nonprofits that help out with grief. One is suicidality, and the other one is just a grief center, all grief inclusive in our community here in Monroe. But also I'm part of 6 Feet Over, which is specifically helps suicide families prior, post, and also while they're going through it, like if they have any questions or concerns. And so it's absolutely wonderful, because what I'm finding is, specifically in the punk realm, which we'll get into, everybody's struggling with mental health, especially in this, you know, and we don't have to get into this, Trev, with the whole political situation, because it's a whole bag of rats itself.
Yeah. But
it's not helping the mental health by any means, form, or shape. And so we can do what we've done as a society and practice apathy, which we're being told to practice, or we can start actually caring about each other and use empathy. And if we could open up 10% of our empaths out there, we could really make a difference in this world.
I think you're right. It took me years to kind of open up that side of me, and a lot of therapy. You know what I mean? Because like I don't know. I'm assuming I'm older than you. I'm in my 40s, and like we were, you know, I was raised a specific way to not deal with that stuff, right? To not do it, to man up. That was the big thing, man up, you know, and like I did it. I did it. And like, I'm like, yeah, I'm good. And then when I was like 35, I'm like, I'm not really good.
I'm going down.
Yeah, like
I'm going down.
I was like, I'm just so accustomed to not being good that I just assumed that's the normal, right? So, yeah, and then the older I got, like, you know, the more therapy I've had, like at some point, like at one point, I remember I yelled at my therapist because I was watching blah blah blah, and I started crying, and it's your fault, like. You
open the floodgates. How dare you? Yeah, Trev, like I say it to the high schoolers because I go in and I talk to the high schoolers, and I preface this because I was also I'm sure you're still in the millennial, right? You're still part of that.
Yeah. 81. I'm like the elder millennial.
I was born in 87, so you're 6 years older than me. But anyways. We didn't talk about it. We didn't talk about sexuality. We didn't talk about, you know, things that we thought uncool, right? We just kind of did our thing, and that was the way it was. And the problem is so, like, I talk to the high schoolers today, and I'll say, you know, this whole idea that boys don't cry, right? The Cure, you know, saying it all this time. But the idea is okay, there's a big game coming up in a couple weeks, right? We all know what it is. It's the Super Bowl. And I say, all right, all the guys in this room, I want you to answer me. At the end of that game, what are all those players doing? And they're crying.
Yeah.
They're absolutely crying. Both sides, winning, losing.
Win or lose. Like, yeah.
Trev, here's the sad part. That's okay because that's manly. That's great. But God forbid you cry at your grandmother's funeral.
Yeah.
Why?
Right.
And I have them, like, think about it. And then I also say now, women, I want you to answer this. In your opinion, who is a stronger male? A male that keeps his emotions in, or a male that actually expresses their emotions? And all of them say one that expresses. And I go, so there you go, man. There's actually the answer.
That's good because for a long time they didn't think that either, though. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, that's change, dude. That's change. And believe it or not, like you going to these schools and talking about this stuff, like that's change too. Like and then we haven't even hit the artistic part of this conversation yet with the music. So like you're just man, like this.
Well, I'll be honest, Trev. I'm an existentialist, so everything is surrounded by death. So even our music is a good way. Yeah. Because for me, the music is my release. That is my release from my grief.
And that's what we always talk about that on here. Like what the music is, like what it does for you. Now, before we get into that, right? Because we're on that brink. I have to tell you this story. So there was a gentleman I knew from back home, but before I knew him, I would see him out, and like I knew he was like a funeral director, right? So I was taught at a young age, you don't cry, you don't do this, you don't do that, you don't show anything but rage. I was taught rage. That's what I was taught, and that's what I was for a very long time. And then like I remember my grandfather had died, and like after my grandmother had passed, I'm not telling you the story. I don't want. I really. I'm not trying to have you like be my therapist right now or anything like that. Because like the way I've seen death that he for you know, I guess a normal person, like, or not a normal person, but like a person who wasn't raised in 4 generations of death, a funeral home and everything. But like I've seen a lot of death at a young age from my family, and like when my grandmother passed, it kind of like something broke inside of me. And like, I felt like I should distance myself from everyone I loved. That way it wouldn't hurt. And then when my grandfather went, it fucking hurt so much more. And I remember at like the wake and like, or the service, and I was good. I was like, I just stood there and I just like was just quiet, and then everyone left. And then I remember I walked up to him and Benny, I bawled my eyes out. I like fell, like hanging on, like holding on to him. And I'm getting a little emotional talking about it. And I remember I heard a noise and I turned my head, and it was that funeral director I used to see out at the bars. I wanted to fight him for like 5 years.
Oh, because that was like, because rage, right? That was your emotion.
He saw me in my most vulnerable moment at that point in my life, and like I was like, that can't happen. You know what I mean? And like I never did any. Like I ended up becoming friends with the guy later on in life, like because like I worked at bars, so like we ended up, you know, I ended up saying, all right, he's an all right guy, you know, even though he saw me cry. Like, But like, I wanted to share that story because like that's the difference between like how I was raised and what I am now. Like, you know, I'm here telling you the story and I'm getting choked up. You know what I mean? Like, it's easy. It's easier to think you're okay by like hiding it, by burying it, like dissociating from it. But in reality, like letting it out is what's the best way to get through. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, absolutely. Well, I want to humanize a couple things. First of all, your grandma and your grandfather's first names. What are they?
Jane was my grandmother, and my grandfather was Angelo or Jazz. His name was Jazz. He was a musician. Jazz? So yeah.
So Jane and Jazz.
Yeah.
Okay, so first and foremost, I'm so sorry for the loss of Jane and Jazz. I want to put names to the story.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to do is I want to humanize the funeral director, because here's the thing. When I first started, even being a son of a funeral director and a grandson and a great-grandson of a funeral director, I would always look down. Whenever people were showing emotion, I'd look down. And I realized as I got older that that's not actually giving room for grief. Because the idea is, if I am actually looking at you, and I'm sure this was exactly what you didn't want to happen with this funeral director, I have to accept the grief too.
Yeah.
And the thing is the second a funeral director loses emotion, doesn't feel anything, a funeral director shouldn't be a funeral director anymore, in my opinion. It's like cops, right? It's like the cops who get to the point where they're so disenfranchised with the past that they're not good cops anymore. It's the same thing. So my thing is, I want to go to that funeral director because that takes a lot for a funeral director to actually look at somebody when they're going through emotion. So I just want to humanize the funeral director there for a second. And he's lucky that he didn't get his ass kicked. But at the end of the day,
that would have been that would have been a bad thing.
But here's the sad part, right? We love, so grief to me is love. It's all it is.
Yeah.
It's 100% what it is. And we choose to love people. So, like, it is our active choice to fall in love with people. So if anybody's to blame for our grief, it's ourselves for loving somebody. But if you look to the stem of it, grief is just love. So why are you upset with yourself for loving somebody? And then going further, Trev, the more you love somebody, the more it's going to hurt. So what I tell people when they say that is like they'll ask me and my twin, who's the psychologist, because funeral director, some people will just say things because they know we have to like keep it shut, right? This idea that, and the client privilege or whatever, and they'll say to me, "When will I stop grieving?" And my answer to them is, "How long are you going to live?"
Yeah.
Because that's the truth. We don't graduate. Grief is not something you graduate. It's not something you get a diploma and you're like, well, you graduated your grandpa's grief. You don't have to. Because the problem is it comes in waves, right?
Right.
Yeah. Even for you, I'm sure like there's a part of that.
I was just thinking about him recently and like this all came up. It's so weird that we're having this conversation now because it came up, you know?
It's meant to happen. Well, and that's another thing too. Like you hear grandpa's favorite song or you smell something that grandma would have made and then like all of a sudden you're back to the, if you want to get into the 5 stages, which we won't talk about, but that's the thing. And so like I tell high schoolers, because nobody is telling them this, any feeling that you have is normal. The sad part is it's abnormal only to you because we don't talk about it.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, you got it, man. Whew.
You feel better?
I got it. Can I mail you a check?
Yes, absolutely. My office hours are now, right?
Yeah, man. I'm sorry that we had to talk about work.
You know what? This is why I do it. It is a calling. Like for me, if Trev, if you even get off this pod and you're like, you know what he said made a lot of sense. I want to think about some of this stuff. Or do you have children, Trev?
No kids.
Okay.
That's a different. We won't go into
that. But your friends, right? So your next time your friend tells you, like, I'm really struggling with this, be like, hey, man, like, check out this podcast, or like, this guy said something. This weird funeral director said something to me that really like is resonating now. Because that's the thing, like. You start talking it, like, that's the whole reason I'm doing this, right? At the end of the day, if I can help somebody go through grief, because the problem is anger is a perfect example, and I tell this to high schoolers, right? Because the big thing high schoolers want to know about is suicide. But yet again, the schools don't like when I talk about it, but then I tell them, sit in the room when I'm talking about it. Because I want you to see their eyes. And I'll ask them, is there any questions you guys have before I get started? Can you talk about suicide? I'm like, There you go, counselors. They're already there. So the thing is like, if you don't take care of your anger, what does anger become?
I don't know.
It becomes fear and isolation, right?
Yeah.
Jedi thing,
Yeah,
right?
here comes me.
And what does isolation eventually become?
Depression.
And what does depression lead to if you don't take care of depression?
Yeah. It leads to suicide.
It leads to suicide. So there's the circle.
Yeah.
So how do we not get to suicide? We don't isolate. And how do we not isolate? We talk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, it's honestly one of the big things that this podcast became was to talk about mental health and be able to talk about these things, because like when I have a guest on and say somebody, I don't know, in Rhode Island knows of the Boy Detective but doesn't know anything about you guys other than your music, right? And then they happen to listen to this podcast and they hear this and they can relate to something. Like that's what life. And I've been that person who's been on that brink of just like, I don't need to be here anymore, and
Yep.
finding, and for me, finding music that I relate to because of that has brought me back so many times. To not feel alone by somebody you don't even know. You don't have to you don't have to be obsessed with them, but just to hear that someone else went through something you went through a song, that would make me feel so much like not better, but like I felt less alone. You know what I mean? And that's the step, right? And that's you coming back, I think, from that, right? It's you walking backwards now. So that's why we do this, man. And what an amazing opening to this podcast we just had.
It's like, what is this podcast about?
I know. I'm really happy we had this. I'm really happy we talked about it.
I love when the fans find out that I'm a funeral director, because it's like, you are the last person I would.
Yeah. So let's talk about that.
I am the walking representation of what I want people to start seeing funeral directors are. These wild people in ska punk bands, because that's who we are.
Dude, I gotta tell you, so I discovered you guys in I want to say it was 2022, early 2022. It was after Band from the Bathtub came out, and we do a monthly show of a roundtable show. And someone, my buddy Michael, used to be on the show. He's from Ohio, and he brought your guys' EP, and it blew me away. And I remember when we started talking, and then I feel like he wasn't there for the episode. He couldn't make it, so we started talking about it. And one of the other guys said ska punk. I'm like, I got offended for you guys. I'm like, what do you mean? That's not because it sounds so much different than what normal ska punk is to me. That I was because there's definitely harder elements to it and everything. So it wasn't all just rock steady beats, and you know what I mean. So I was like, what are you talking about? Just because it's got a horn in it, it makes it ska. I'm like, does that mean? I went off. I was like, is Paul Simon ska now because he uses horns? I was
no, absolutely. Well, and that's the trickiest part, because people now have called the ska core is the big thing that we're getting getting integrated to. The problem is we're everything.
Yeah.
The problem is Nick and I. I'm going to get a little in the history here, so I don't know if you're
Please do.
So Nick, my guitarist, and I started this as just a recording project. We were in bands before, Come On, Cardinals, and a bunch of other bands that were just pop punk with flares of hardcore in it. And so basically what happened is he mentioned to me, we were both having our first two, we both have two kids, and we were having them simultaneously. So he had his son, and a year later I had my daughter, and then he had his second son, then I had my son a year later. So it was a year. So it was one of those years where we had a lot of time to do things at home, but we didn't have a lot of time to do things outside of home. Mm-hmm. So it was a perfect time to start writing songs, and he wanted me to be a part of it. And I was playing bass at the time and singing, and he's a musician. He could play everything and anything. So he played guitar, drums, and vocals for Dorcas Malorcas, which is technically the first EP we came out with in 2019. But we started in 2017. We wrote Dorcas with our kids, and that was kind of the idea, right? This idea that our kids are going to be the main topic, and being these young parents who think we're still 21, but we're not. Our bodies are starting to ache. So we wrote Dorcas, and we had a lot of fun with it. But the problem was it got to the point where we were having too much fun, and we couldn't do anything with it. We couldn't play it. We couldn't go out and play it. And so Nick and I were like, well, maybe we should get a drummer. So we put out our feelers for a drummer. We got a drummer. Like, I will say this, the one lucky thing about the Boy Detective is we've been extremely lucky when we need something, it just happens. So we needed a drummer. We got a drummer. We literally put out a Craigslist for horns. We got 2 horn players, and those 2 horn players are still with us today, Jared and Seth, and they're wonderful.
Wow.
And then we're like, oh, well, I guess we could start playing shows. So then we played show. The problem was at that point, we already wrote Band from the Bathtub when we got all these members in. So if you listen to the first one, it's only midi horns. So the one you listen to is midi horns or whatever. So we released Band, and we got, for being a local band nobody knew about, a lot of traction from. Like, this is really good. And the idea was Nick and I fell in love with late 90s, early 2000s punk, pop punk, emo, and ska. And we would incorporate all of those into our songs. So this is going back to what you were saying, Trev. That's why it's hard to actually pin us down, because the second you think, oh, they're doing their upbeats or the upstrokes, so they're ska, but then wait, no, they're doing a breakdown. Like, why are they doing a breakdown? And then why are they doing like a emo chant, hardcore Newfound Glory thing? And so like we were incorporating, because the big thing was Nick he always wanted to do a ska punk band. So he's like, we got to do something with that. And I was like, one of my ultimate favorite bands of all time is Suicide Machines, and one of his ultimate favorite bands was Less Than Jake. So I was like, if we could combine those 2 bands and make a band, like, I'm down, Nick. And he's like, I'll do you one better. Let's start doing a band that incorporates Suicide Machines, Less Than Jake. We'll do some Saves the Day stuff. We'll throw in some like Promise Ring. Like, so we're like everything that our generation grew up loving, or at least listening to, even if we didn't want to admit we liked it. We put it together, and I think that's why people really fascinated with our band, because there's so much stuff in it that they're like, man, I don't know why I like this, but I like this. In fact, Eric Abbey from Jay Navarro and the Traders, who we play a lot with, was just on a podcast, and he said the best representation of our band I could ever say, and he goes, the Boy Detective, the one band that fits in everywhere but doesn't fit in anywhere. And I'm like, I love that so much.
I like that.
We got to play a hardcore show because my guitarist Nick's younger brother Cam is in D Block, which is a big hardcore band in Detroit. So his parents have 2 sons and 2 signed bands and 2 different avenues, and we got to play with them, and it was wonderful. And it was funny because we played with all these hardcore kids, that are doing the bows, right? They're throwing the bows, because we do the skank, we don't do the bows in the pop punk ska realm. So I was like, oh, I'm so excited to be in the pit, and I hope I get a bloody nose, because that's the other thing too, Trev. I play 90% of the show with a crowd. I am not on stage. That's one of the big things, because my idea was I grew up in the basement shows and the pole barn shows in my town, because we're farmers here in Ida. So I like to be people. There should be no difference, in my opinion, from people that are in the audience to the people on the band. We're all into this together, right? This unity effect. So if you come to our show, you're part of our show without you even knowing you're part of a show. And then we started doing this like thing they call the cuddle puddle, which we lay down and then people lay down on top of us, and then it becomes this big circle pit of people laying down on each other. It's weird. It's really strange. But it's unified, and we love it, and it works out pretty well. So we came out with Band. That went really well, and we were like, oh, gosh, now what do we do, right? So we wrote another album called Art Theft, which at the time Art Theft came out, Nick and I were like, these are too good of songs. Let's just, and Trev, you're going to learn this about me, and I think this is why I sent you the email. It's a perfect example. I take shots. So whether you accept that email or not, that's how every email to everybody I've ever, so like Fat Records have a weird case file email from me that's like, hey, don't let this case go cold. It's Benny from the Boy Detective, and this is our band. Because I was like, how many emails do people get the same thing over and over and over and over? And like, nobody wants to, they're going to get like swept to the back, right?
Yeah.
But if you say something that like stands out, so I was like, I'm going to take my shot and send it out to all the labels that my brain can think we would belong on. So I sent it out to Fat Records and Hellcat Records and of course it's going to blow my mind, like all the records that I could think of at the time, Misfits Records even. And so like, and then I did like the tier down, right? I did the Bad Time and the Ska Punk International and then Punkerton. And I literally wrote Brandon from Punkerton a case file that had this whole story about this detective that's too old, and he's trying to find this one record label to get this song out to solve a case that solves this murder. It's a whole thing, like literally like 2 pages this poor guy had to read through. Yeah. And my grammar is horrible, so I'm sure that was fun. And so I get an email back from him with another 2 pages of his line of the story, like, "Oh, I saw your note. I was out in the alleyways looking for you, and like we need to." And he literally took, like, he's an artist, graphic engineer, or whatever. So he literally made a picture of a phone booth with a piece of paper, like with a knife stuck in it, that says, "We need to meet." And I was like, dude, this is so good. And there was part of me that's like, I kind of don't even want to have a conversation with him. I want to keep this story going, see how far it goes. Right. I was like, we won't stop this. Well, like, here's my number. Like, can we talk? And a couple labels did get back to us, but none. What I'm finding, and this is the thing too, right, Trev? You have to learn this, like, especially when you start making these steps in higher tiers, which you never know you're in those higher tiers until you're in them, if that makes sense too, is like, you're still learning. So, like, even so I'm like, okay, now how does this work? Like, how does a label work? Because we literally have this album done. We're releasing it. We already released it on January 1st. I'm talking to this label at March, like, but I want Art Theft to be vinyled or sent out with. So how do we do that? And so, like, I'm talking to him, and he's like, okay, well, what we'll do is we'll find a way to repress Art Theft, and we'll send it out that way. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. That's rad. Because it belongs in people's ears. And then I was like, but that's kind of unfair to make people play for vinyl for 7 songs, right? Because that was the other Boy Detective thing that we do for some reason, is we only write 6 or 7 songs on each of our albums, which, in our opinion, because a lot of us are ADHD, works really well. Because
7 songs is a full. The 7 songs works. I feel like 7 songs.
Yeah, but is that tough to make somebody buy a vinyl? Because vinyls are so expensive. Like, there's no way around it. Like, vinyl is expensive. So, like, if you're gonna buy a vinyl and you're only getting 7 songs. Like, that's a tough sell.
Nah.
And you can't do a 7-inch because there's too much on it.
Too many, there's too many. Yeah.
You're kind of in the thing. So what we were like, well, we have band. Why don't we do exhibition? And what we'll do is we'll make it like an art gallery thing. And so side A, if you went to this art gallery, if you went into door A, you get Art Theft, A for Art Theft. And then if you went into B, you get Banned from the Bathtub. But we're like, okay, that's cool, but let's even go a step further. And Jaredin, our horn captain, we'll say, per se, said, why don't we just redo the horns? So they're getting actually something new. It's not actually just Banned from the Bathtub that was released. I'm like, oh, that rules. So that's how that album came in.
So that's what exhibition is? It's Art Theft and Banned from the Bathroom together?
Yes.
Ah, okay. Because I was listening to it today, and, like, you could definitely, like, I was like, oh, man, because I was listening to, I've heard I've heard Art Theft and I heard Banned from the Bathroom. So when I at one point I thought, because I was using, like, I have, like, a free thing to Apple Music right now, so I was like, did they just skip albums? Like, you know what I mean? So that's cool.
It's been the biggest confusion with the ska world.
Hey,
like,
whatever.
I've listened to so many podcasts where they're trying to figure it out, and it makes me laugh every time because they got, like, these, like, conspiracies of why we're doing exhibition and all this, where it's really just we just want to put 2 albums on one and sell it.
Yeah.
Because I feel like everybody deserves it, and those albums. To this day, I think even if, like, we're going in the studio this summer to actually do a full length for once, but I'm gonna be honest with you, I think there's something special about the album that people started listening to the point where we were playing a show once where these awesome women came up to me like, hey, I just want you to know, yet again, you got to realize I live in a very small farm community. Hey, I just want you to know, me and my friends were listening to your album in the middle of a cornfield. I'm like, dude, that rules so much. Like, I can't imagine, like, a farmer on a tractor, like, going past this, like, group of kids listening to The Boy Detective. But Art Theft, I'll get a little bit into that. Art Theft was a tip of the fedora to all of the bands that we really, really loved, and that's why we called it Art Theft. There's literally hints of, like, 25 different songs in Art Theft if you listen to it in its entirety. For instance, like, the Drakkar Noir, Dexter with a Boner, like, that song, track 1, literally starts with a Saves the Day intro type thing. And then, like, in Date Night, the chorus is kind of a steal from a Old Scholars, which is a Detroit ska punk band back in the day, like one of their songs. And then we play with them, and Nick was like, "What if they notice and they're mad at us for doing it?" I'm like, "Nick, come on, let's be honest. If 20 years from now somebody covered a Boy Detective song, the Boy Detective song, wouldn't you be like, that's the coolest thing ever? Like, I don't even care if they get money from it at that point, right? That's a punk thing. Like,
yeah.
if some kids got together and formed a band because of your song, like, that's incredible. I would not be mad at all. I think it'd be really cool. My thing would be, okay, but let me come to your next show and let me get on stage and sing it with you. Like,
yeah. That would be a lot of fun.
So Art Theft was a lot of fun, and that opened a lot of doors for us. So we started playing with Jay Navarro and the Traders, which I already told you, Suicide Machines is like my thing. So like when I first started meeting Jay, it was really weird to separate fanboy and fellow artist. To this day, like we actually are on a talking, like we actually have each other's cell phones and send messages and try to hang out, and he was on one of our songs. But it was to the point where I remember, like, I'll still tell him stories of when I was 16 and rollerblading in my funeral home parking lot, trying to be cool to break the glass, you know? And he's like, please don't tell me that story. That makes me sound so old. And I'm like, yeah, but it's the truth. Like, you know what? At least I'm telling you the truth, right? And so, and now I'm friends with Eric in his band too, and he's like, dude, he's just a kid. Like, you can make fun of him and do your thing. I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna make fun of Jay Navarro, who is like a god and legend to me. Nah, and it's not gonna happen.
How so? Like growing up, you grew up in a small town. What was the closest city for you for a music scene or community?
So I am like in the middle of everything. So I'm 30 minutes from Toledo.
Okay.
I'm 30 minutes from Ann Arbor. I'm an hour away from Detroit.
Yeah.
So that would be the closest. My parents weren't into punk really or any of that. Like my we grew up on like Beach Boys from our dad and Pink Floyd. That was like the wildness of my dad. And then my mom was really big into like the Judds and Barry Manilow. And so the one thing I did learn from them is harmonies, right? Because like Beach Boys, man, like to this day, it doesn't matter if your band sucked, like your instruments sucked, but if you could do harmonies like that, you know, or rip off like Billy Joel's like River of Dreams or whatever, like that kind of stuff, like, man, like that rules. So like we try to do that. Nick and I try to do that. Not great, but we try. So those were like the closest cities. But my older brother Chris, and everybody's got that like older sibling if they grew up in that era that would give us the CDs but hide them, because we grew up in a very conservative Catholic house too, so we weren't allowed to have parental albums. So when I was 13, Chris would be hiding like Enema of the State, you know what I mean, and he would like put it in a thing that says like Ray Stevens classics on the CD, but it was actually Blink-182, Enema of the State. Or we're Michigan kids, so like he had all the Joker's cards from ICP, and he was like handing those, and Limp Bizkit and Bloodhound Gang, Hooray for Boobies, and like all these awesome albums that like we kind of like put us together, like put my music. And then he would go to local shows when he was old enough, and he'd go to a lot of basement shows, and he'd see Suicide Machines at Alvin and the smaller clubs. And so we grew up basically with whatever he would get us. And so a lot of those albums, but the problem was a lot of those albums were like middle albums too. So like I didn't know, like for instance, Blink-182 had Cheshire Cat or Dude Ranch. You know, I just assumed it was Enema of the State on. So then like Nick, who's funny because so my older brother Chris, who's like my music, gave me everything that I know. And I was in bands with him growing up in a horror punk band called Spaghetti Zombies, and then a brother band called Capaul. You can look these both up. You can actually find our stuff still on there. But then Nick, my guitarist, I look at as like the other older brother because he was really big into early stuff. So like he would give me, oh Ben, you gotta listen to the first Less Than Jake album, or you gotta listen to All Gold Can Stay from Newfound Glory to understand, or the old Vandal stuff. And so like it was really interesting. So he gave me like the history part that helped me come up with my music career too.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now, so were you playing music early on?
I started my first band when I was 15. I was lead singer then. I transitioned to bass and singing, so I wasn't the lead person. I was only the lead member in the first band, and then these new bands with Nick.
Now, did you learn, like, because when we talked earlier, you said, like, you know, the music is what gives you your release, right? So
yeah,
did you learn that at that age? Like, was it like, oh, this is what it's all about? Because for me, like, I never knew how to really express myself until I started writing. And then I was like, oh, this is what that is? You know what I mean? Like, so did you realize it right away that it was going to be something huge for you, like big for your life?
I realized, and I think a lot of people do, it opens up the doors to a lot of new friends. It opened up the doors to relationships and women, and for specifically me. But also, all of us brothers, Chris, Nick, and I, those are my brothers that I'm talking about, we were all drama kids, theater kids. So the second you can step on stage and step outside of yourself, and also, like, I love nothing more than sweating on people, like getting in front of people, you know, specifically when they start singing your songs and you're like, this is so weird, this is so strange, that not only are people driving 2 hours to come see you, which had never happened in the past, that's new with the Boy Detective, but also, and I don't know, Trev, if you know much about the Michigan Ska Brigade, but like, we have a huge calling, and it's called Michigan Ska, and they will literally travel 6 hours, 8 hours to come see their Michigan Ska bands, even if you're like the local tier.
Yeah.
To the point where they'll bring flags, and they'll have flags that say Michigan Ska, and like, they're as proud of us as we are of them as fans.
That's awesome.
So for me, it's losing myself in a crowd. And for that hour or half an hour, whatever we're playing, and sweating out, that's how I release all my grief and anger and stress.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Now, is everyone in the band, are you all from the same area, or like is everyone kind of spread? How many members do you have? Is it 5, 4?
So we have 7 now.
Seven. Okay.
We have 7. You're okay. We have a drummer, bassist, guitarist, lead singer, and then 3 horns.
Okay.
We have a sax, trumpet, and a trombone. We have gone through 3 different members. And all 3 of them were just life situation. That's the biggest problem with 7 members too, right?
Yeah,
so there's 7 different people who have 7 different lives and things going on. So we've gone through one drummer. Brett was our original drummer, but he had some life things come up. So we went to Zach. Zach is like just a crazy wild man on the drums, hardcore drummer that's just perfect for us right now. And then we lost our Barry sax player, Rhiannon. She was amazing, but she had life stuff, so we got Emily in. And then we used to have another trumpeter named Lauren. She had a life situation too, so we've had 2 horns and the drummer switch, but other than that, everybody else has stayed constant. Nick and I are from the same area. We're from Monroe County. He's in Dundee technically, and I'm in Ida, but it's like 10 minutes apart. 2 of our members are from Ypsilanti. Emily, who's our new trumpeter, she's from Ida. So there's 3 of us in Monroe County, 2 from Ypsilanti, and then Zach and I think Ricky are like the downriver area, so they're about 40 minutes away from us. So we're all within an hour from each other, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I spent a small time, about a year, in right outside, like living like in the suburb of Pittsburgh, and I had a business where I would go all the way down to Parkersburg, West Virginia, almost every night, and then sometimes they would send me up to like Saginaw, Michigan. So I've traveled Ohio. Yeah. And I worked out of their Columbus office a few times, so I've traveled Ohio quite a bit. Never heard of any of those towns you just mentioned.
well, Punkerton comes from Columbus. Our record label is from Columbus.
Yeah.
Brandon, shout out to Brandon and Punkerton because they rule. He rules, but they as a collective. But he's out of Columbus, so that was really cool. We got to play a show with Five Iron Frenzy in Columbus, and that was one of our biggest shows.
That's awesome. So it seems like Ohio. I mean, so when I was there during COVID, so it wasn't like I was going anywhere for shows, right? So I didn't get a look at Pittsburgh or anywhere around for shows. But like doing the round table that we do with like and having Michael part of it, Michael was so adamant about bringing bands from Ohio to the table, and like so many bands. Like I've learned about so many bands from there, and it seems like the community there seems like it's pretty good. But maybe that's just because. I don't know if that's because like a lot of the bands know each other because they're all in Punkerton? I don't know, but like, what's the community like out there?
So I think you know this, but just to clarify with listeners, we are from Michigan. Our band is actually from Michigan, but because okay. I am literally 20 minutes from the border.
Yeah.
So I'm basically Toledo, like I said. So what I find with Ohio, just like Michigan, is they have clusters, right? So the idea is Toledo has a really good music scene. Cleveland has a really good music scene. Columbus has a really good, and then there's some towns in between. But the big thing is like those are close enough to each other where you can go from one to the other. I mean, even for us to go down to Columbus was only about 3.5 hours. It wasn't that big of a deal. Or Cincinnati, right? So like you can go from us, and that's the beauty because we're at the bottom of Michigan, so we could also go up to Grand Rapids, that's 3.5 hours away, or Detroit, an hour away, or Ann Arbor, that's 30 minutes away, or Kalamazoo, which is only 2.5 hours away. So those are the big cities for Michigan that we have a lot of shows going on.
Yeah, okay. So I didn't realize you guys were technically from Michigan. So
we're at the way bottom of Michigan.
Gotcha. I probably driven through that area when I was coming back from Michigan from Saginaw.
What highway would you take? 75?
Yeah.
Okay. So you would probably go through Monroe, like the actual city.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, because I know I would hit I'd hit Ann Arbor, I think, on the way out, and then I would be because like I said, I live right outside of Pittsburgh. I just my business had me going all over. I've been all the way up to like Sault Ste. Marie.
Yep. The UP, baby. Whole different country.
Yeah,
it's a whole different country. Even though it's my state, it's a whole different country.
Yeah, so, but yeah, so just in the general area, I don't know. It just seems like you guys all like it's like a close knit bunch, which is good. Especially even if you're like you can add Michigan to that too, because like I had Middle Out on last year. Yeah, last year I had Middle Out on, and like we talked to them too, and like. I like what's going on out there, and it seems like a lot of the bands like are on Punkerton, and I spoke to Brennan recently because I got him a newspaper from the Boston Globe because
that's awesome.
Yeah, because my record club was in there, and they had a picture of the Middle Out record because that was one of the records we used. So anyway, he wanted a copy of it, so I got him a copy. Anyway, I was talking to him like, "What's going on? Like, you're doing good stuff," and he's like, "Yeah, we're trying, blah blah." But like it seems like there's a lot of good going on out there.
It is, and I really honestly I haven't met all the obviously bands on the label because we do spread from a couple of us are in Florida and some of us are in St. Louis. Yeah. So I haven't had the opportunity to meet, but the obviously Middle Out there are label mates. Like we play a lot of shows with them. They're wonderful and we probably wouldn't be on Punkerton if they didn't exist, because they vouched for us, but they also, like, I had a conversation with them because I did my due diligence, like, is this a real deal? Is this something we should do? Also there's a band kind of on the label, like it teeters on it, but they did their vinyl through them, Lame Ass Dads. That was the other big band that vouched for us.
I've had them on too. Yeah.
We're wonderful dudes, man. In fact, I was telling Ryan, who's the one that I've been in most of the contact with, like he is so supportive. Like it's almost like he would rather support other bands than his own at times.
Yeah.
And it rules, but I feel like like I like Lame Ass Dads too, you know what I mean?
Awesome, yeah.
But like I think he is one of those people that is genuinely, he doesn't care what happens with him. It's more like I want the scene to be great. So you guys have something, and Trev, if you ever get an opportunity, see the Boy Detective because we are something else. Like it is the most energy you will probably get from a lot of bands. It's kind of our thing, and that's the one hard thing about. Releasing music is we always say to people, like, because they'll say that they're like, your music's good and we have fun with it, but then like your live set is so much better. It's like, how do you put a live set in an album? You can't.
Yeah,
you really can't. And even if you did like a live album, you're still not there.
It's still hard. Yeah. It's very rare that you can do a live album and capture the energy of the show itself. Yeah,
you gotta smell the room, you gotta taste the room, you gotta be thrown up against people, like it's a whole thing.
Yeah. So with that, like, so, I mean, because you have a pretty demanding career and you have a family, and what's like shows like, so being where you are, I think you're pretty good in a central location to be able to spread out and go to to do shows. But like, do you guys do any kind of touring, like 2-week touring or anything like that, or you can't do that?
So we've been very lucky, and yet again, I'm going to vouch out to Brandon because I think in his hopes, he really wants us to do some more touring than we do. The biggest problem is obviously 3 of us are dads with children. On top of, I'm a funeral director. One is like a teacher, so you got to worry about the school year, The biggest thing, so we have done, we call them like weekenders because that's what we do.
Yeah.
So we did a 4-day. We did 4 days. That was wild. We did a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. That was the longest we've done. I'll be honest. Like, and I know some bands are like, well, they haven't put in their dues.
No,
we play a lot of shows.
I hate them people say stuff like it's cool. Like, you got, all right, do the shows, but like, you know what? Like, we all have lives. We all have got families. Like.
And then on top of it too, it's like that's 7 of us going to a place. It's not like 3 of us can get in one van
right.
and drive. We have to get you almost can't get 1 hotel room. You got to get 2 hotel rooms. And then on top of that, you have to get you have to rent a big car that can handle all this stuff. And then we have horns and we have all these instruments and stuff we got to deal with. So I'm not complaining because obviously ska bands have been doing it forever, and there's some bands that have been doing it since the 90s and they're still doing it. But I will say, like, we do the best we can. So we got invited to Pooza Fest this year in Montreal. We're going to do that.
Nice.
We're hoping Supernova gets hold of us. They haven't yet, but let's say they do. Like, we're going to do that. For recording, we decided to hopefully record with somebody incredible, but we have to worry about their touring schedule to figure out what. So we're going to have to actually go to their spot, which is quite a distance. And then, we do a couple things, but like I said, with Five Iron, we did a Columbus, Chicago, and then 2 Detroit shows. So we did like a little triangle thing we did there. That was a lot of fun. We're hoping to get out to the West Coast because the biggest problem too, our name is out. Like that was the hard thing, and I will say that I give the ska community a lot of credit on that. They're close. They're a close-knit brigade, and if you do your job right, and you're good people. That's the other big thing too, with specifically the ska punk community that we're a part of. You have to be good people, and I love that. I love that I can go to a show and not have to worry about getting my ass kicked or. Somebody ridiculing somebody for their gender or for, that's garbage. And Trev, I'm sure you remember going to shows where that wasn't the case.
Right.
It wasn't the case.
Right.
And so it's wonderful to be a part of something that is unified to the point where I'm actually to the point where I know that if Michigan Ska is there, I can let my full guard down. Like, because they would jump on somebody if they attacked their boy, this is our boy.
No
but it's really cool. Like, I'm very happy to be at the spot we are. I think this new album, if our trajectory keeps going, is going to get even bigger. But the thing is my expectation that we're going to be a 6-month touring band? That's not. I don't.
No, yeah, and I don't think it's really needed anymore. To be honest with you, like. We're in a different world, right? It's not the same. And like, and I think as long as you guys are putting out music pretty consistently. I've seen a couple singles have dropped between last summer and now, right? You dropped something this year, right? A single already?
We dropped our Christmas song in December, technically.
Yep.
And then we released Unrealized Gains on January 1st.
Great song, by the way.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
then we have 2 more. We have 2 more singles that are coming out in the next couple months. And then that kind of then we have to refill the tank, and that's what the album's going to be.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, we had a lot of momentum, and to be honest, we're lucky. And I got to give Nick because Nick tends to write 80% of what we do. I'm not discrediting my drummer; he's incredible. I'm not discrediting my bassist. They take Nick's skeleton and make it art, make it
full,
detective that it is. But Nick is the one that kind of comes up with the skeleton for lyrics and the skeleton for the songs, and he has an ear for writing songs that people really like. I wish I could write like him. I wish I could, in my brain, write a full song. I always tell Trev, and if you've listened to me on podcasts before, this is the truth. I am Nick's traveling salesman. He comes up with a vacuum cleaner. I'm just selling it.
Yeah. That's cool. I like that. Yeah.
But my numbers are good, so I'll just keep doing what I'm doing.
No doubt. That's awesome. Well, if you guys ever come out to the East Coast, let me know. If you guys end up coming out to like the New England, Boston or something like that,
we're hoping, because Pooza, right? We gotta.
You got to go up that way. Yeah.
We were thinking about maybe hitting Buffalo, New York.
Okay.
So I know that's not that, but it's at least closer.
Yeah.
For a lot of people. But we're hoping with like Joker's Republic and stuff, they're a buddy band we got to play with. We're hoping to hit New York, and our good friend Jess lives in Philly. She really wants us to hit Philly. So, like, we need to hit that. That is eventually going to happen, and maybe we'll do another one of those, like, weekenders. It would be nice to have, like, I don't know, like Suicide Machines take us for a 3-day tour, around, because that would rule. Or Jake, I don't know. Just throwing names out if they're listening. Maybe Goldfinger. I don't know. It's something that would be up our alley, But the beautiful thing is, like I said, we're also, like, we've been asked to play, like, with the Queers and with, like, all these other like punk bands that have nothing to do with the ska, because you're right, Trev. We don't have. There's no rules, A, and then B, we aren't just your average.
You're not. Yeah. To the point that I defended you.
Yeah, Trev, I appreciate it. What did you say we are? What was your thing?
I was just like, I'm like, they're a punk band. They just have horns. I was so mad. I got it.
Well, the problem is we do have forwards and we do have upstrokes. So there is like that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's just fun for me. Like, I don't know. I don't really get into the whole genre thing anyway. It's just it's all rock and roll. It's all music. It's all there. It's all I either like it or I don't, and I like The Boy Detective. So I don't know if there was something about it that made me like be like, it's not ska. You know what I mean? But
Don't you dare just typecast them as this specific band.
Yeah,
I appreciate it. I kind of like the mystique of it. I kind of like people don't understand why we're doing things and why we did Art Theft and Exhibition and what are we doing?
It kind of adds to the lore of like the detective part of the name, right? Like
and I love it because Nick doesn't want it. Like the Boy Detective comes from a book. It's Nick and I's favorite book. It's called The Boy Detective Fails by Joe Mano from Chicago. It's awesome. It's a wonderful book if you get a chance. Talk about death, grief, and it's wonderful. Anyways, beside the point. So, like, I love it. I love the idea of, like, being lead detective. Like, and I always sign that. And he's like, I hate that you do it, but it works, so I can't tell you to not do it anymore. Getting us on shows with Five Iron Frenzy. You got us on shows. You're singing with Jay Navarro and the Traders now. Like, whatever you're doing, just keep doing what you're doing, But it's fun.
Yeah.
It's fun. So we do got some shows coming up. We're hitting up Chicago again.
Cool.
We're gonna hit up, like I said, Pooza. So we're hoping to hit maybe Buffalo or maybe Toronto, depending on which way we end up going to Montreal. So now we can say we're international. You know what I mean?
That's all. That's right. That's it. I think I had one person on this podcast from a South Korean band, and I was like, "We're an international podcast now."
Made the big leagues right now. You can close up shop, Trev. You can close up shop.
Where can people find the Boy Detective? Where can they find you on social media, websites? Where can they pick up your vinyl? All that stuff.
You can find the Boy Detective everywhere. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Music, all streamings. We have our own YouTube. Buying our stuff, go right to the source. Go to punkertonrecords.com. I'm sure Brandon would love that for more than one reason. Go there. Not only that, but you could check out all the rest of our bands. Whoa, Middle Out, right? Also, you can look at Trev's vinyl of the week or whatever he's going to send out maybe next time of Exhibition. That'd be sick, right? I don't know. I'm just plugging some things. Maybe they happen. Maybe they don't.
No doubt.
But absolutely, check out Exhibition. It's our full length LP vinyl with both I mean, it's the best of the Boy Detective, really, at this point. It's our greatest hits of Band from the Bathtub and Art Theft. And then also we have a 7-inch you can get with our song from with Jay Navarro and Eric Abbey from Jay Navarro and the Traders called I Am Not a Cannibal Anymore. For the record, I'm not a cannibal anymore, so you can get that. And on the backside, which is really cool because it's a 7-inch, we did it with another of our label mates called Half Dizzy, and they did a song with Vic Ruggiero from the Slackers. So you get the Traders, and you get the Slackers, and you get the Boy Detective and Half Dizzy. So you get the best of all four worlds.
All on one 7-inch. That's awesome.
All on one 7-inch. So pick that up and pick up your exhibition LP coming out. I think Brandon's actually coming up with a cool shirt. Hopefully soon. That's going to be sick also on Punkerton. And I think we just picked up Dreadnoughts. So there's the Dreadnoughts albums are going to be
really? Wow.
Okay. So check that out. Honestly, you can and if you have any questions about or also for the podcast, you can go to Let's Talk About Death podcast.com, but you can also just check our we have all of our episodes on Spotify and Apple, but if you don't have any of that, you can go just to Let's Talk About Death podcast.com, and you can listen to all of them from there. You don't have to have a thing on anything. And then I mean, we're easy to find. We have Instagram, we have Facebook, so we all have our own personal too. So if you have any questions about Death or about band or maybe about both or whatever, just DM us. I'm sure we'll get back to you.
Cool. Any shows coming up in the next couple months? Or
we sure do. We took off January and most of February to write the album. We want to live demo our album, so that's what we're working on right now.
Nice.
So we do have one show in February. It's the Saturday after Valentine's Day. I always get this wrong. It's either 15th or 16th. I think it's the 15th. Okay. We're going to be playing at the Pyramid Scheme in Grand Rapids with Dance Contraption and Something to Do. Okay. There are also wonderful ska punk bands, if you want to call it that, in the area. Something to Do is from somewhere else, but they're wonderful. They're amazing. I'm excited to play with them. So we have that. March is a very busy March is a very busy month. We have a show with Half Dizzy on March 22nd in Detroit. We're also playing with Catch 22. We're opening up for Catch 22. And then we're also doing a benefit show for our good friend Bob from St. Thomas Boys Academy, who died this year. We're going to do a benefit show for them.
I was just at a benefit show for Bob this past weekend.
Oh, dude, Bob ruled.
Everybody knew. I didn't know him, but everybody knew him.
He was a really. We played a show with him like that week.
Oh man!
And we were having a silly conversation about something. I can't even remember what it was, but I do remember like how short life is, and like specifically about grief and loss. I'm sitting there. I'm like, man, this is. So we played a show the next week, and I wore like a white tee that just said "Rest in Peace, Bob." And I was like, dude, like, because like that's his legacy is like music and all the people that surrounded his family and his wife. And so, anyways, like we're gonna do a cool benefit for his wife and his family in March sometime.
So this is why I'm always like talking about what this is, and it's like because like. People talk about scenes a lot, but I'm like, no, this is a community. It's a little bit different. You know what I mean? For me, it's a little bit different. Scenes have a lot of like gatekeeping in them and stuff like that, where communities don't do that. They're very accepting and they do stuff like this. You know what I mean? A band that hasn't been a band for years did a reunion, two reunion shows for Bob. You know what I mean? Out this way, and then you guys are out in Michigan. You're doing something. You know what I mean? Like this is bigger than just like an area, you know?
People mean more to us than just the music they write. And it also represents our own mortality in the situation and how precious these members are and these people that you go see on stages, and also the people that are in the down under the stage that are coming to see you. Like as much as it hurts when we lose one of our own when it comes to a band, it also hurts just as much when we lose a local bartender that's been bartending for all the fans that come to our shows. We just lost one in Detroit, Cat, rest in peace. Or any of our fans, right? Because you look out in that crowd expecting to see that face, and they're not there anymore. And we do it for them, and they do it for us. And it's very. We need to just admit what it is and start being just more empathetic about it. This is going back to the beginning, right? This full circle idea is like we do this for each other. But I will say something: if you haven't gone to a show in a long time, or if you've never gone to live shows, because apparently the new generation doesn't do that as much, I challenge you to, because live shows and supporting local artists, because that's what we are, is incredible. And I think you will be surprised, what you come out of that show with, but also the friends and relationships you might make.
Camaraderie, yeah, that's all important. And like my cousin brought two of his kids down, and one of them, like, they were nervous. They were going to Guar, and I'm like, no, you're gonna find your people. Like Guar, because Guar, from the outside to the general public, Guar's a scary band.
Absolutely.
But then you get there and you see all these people that are just like you. You know what I mean? And like they're all just having fun. And I'm like, you're gonna find people.
It's theater. You know? It's theater is what it is. It's wonderful theater, and that goes back to breaking the fourth wall that Guar does all the time. But yeah, so Trev, this is wonderful, and I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about not only my band, but specifically just about my whole like goal in life is to start having good, healthy conversations about grief and loss. So I appreciate that, Trev. Really,
Benny, the door is always open. When the album's done, or if you have something you just want to talk about and come back, hit me up. We'll do it. We'll do it again.
I will do that. This has been wonderful. Thank you so much. From all of us detectives, we really appreciate you.